welcome to my channel. So with the holiday season right around the corner, I feel like there's a ton of videos right now about best of beauty, things you should buy, and personally I've been really overwhelmed with all of it, and so I thought it'd be fun to actually do a video about products that I would not recommend. So these are products that I found disappointing. They're not necessarily bad products, but they're kind of my hot takes in that these are all products that a lot of people have said really good things about, have gotten rave reviews on YouTube, but at least for me personally, just really didn't work out. Now, I want to preface this by saying that, of course, makeup works differently on everybody. So if these products worked for you, I hope you won't be offended by this video. Everyone is just different in terms of how makeup interacts with their skin or what their makeup preferences are. But at the same time, I think we've all probably had the experience now and then of buying a really overhyped product just to find out that it didn't quite meet our expectations. So hopefully this is somewhat cathartic from that standpoint. So if you guys are interested in hearing my hot takes, then just stick around. So to start off, this product is actually the one that inspired me to film today's video. So this is the Tom Ford Traceless Foundation Stick. The day I'm filming this product has gone on sale for 50% off. So a lot of beauty YouTubers are really promoting this, really advertising it very heavily. And for me personally, I would say that this product is nice, but honestly, I don't really get the hype. So I purchased this in order to get sort of a more luxurious foundation stick in comparison to my Merit foundation stick, which is what I have typically been using. And I had high hopes for this because I feel like most people who have reviewed it have said this is one of their all-time favorite foundations, whereas the Merit one has gotten a lot less attention. But I did film a side-by-side with these two, comparing them, and I was really shocked and surprised I actually liked the Merit more. And since filming that video, my experiences have just confirmed that even more. So here is the foundation on this side of my face, nothing on this side. And I have on the shade 4.5 Ivory in case you want a shade match. And you can see with one layer, it's a pretty sheer application. I would say this foundation is overall sheer to medium. You're not going to get very high coverage. The finish is quite nice on initial application. It's very natural looking. So this is not a bad foundation by any means. But what I have found that for me personally, if I do build up this foundation a little bit more in order to get the coverage that I'm looking for, it tends to start looking a bit greasy on my face over the course of the day. For context, I do have normal to dry skin, so this is not usually a problem I face with foundation. In fact, usually I have more of the opposite issue, that certain dry patches are looking bad by the end of the day. But with this foundation, it sort of feels like it never totally settles into the skin. And so it does tend to kind of flake off and wear less nicely than my other foundations. The other thing I'm not a huge fan of is even if I advance the product, when I go to put it on my face, the pressure of pushing it down tends to make the product turn and then suddenly it goes back into the tube. So that's a very small complaint, but for a luxury product, I do find it a little bit poorly designed. And this is something that I don't have an issue with any other foundation sticks that I've tried. So on the whole, I would say that this one is okay, but especially for the price, really not worth it in my book, and I would definitely recommend the Merit stick over this if you have similar preferences to me. Next up for concealer, we have the Tower28 Concealer. I've been featuring this a lot on my channel because I am now planning on returning this along with one of the other products that I'll mention today. But because I plan on returning it, I want to just give it a few more shots because I always feel bad about returning makeup. I know that they have to destroy the makeup product, and so I feel like I should at least try to give it as much of a chance as possible. And also, at least by filming content with it, I feel like it kind of somewhat justifies the fact that I bought it, since at least you guys can appreciate and benefit from the reviews, hopefully. So let me actually bring you guys a bit closer while I dab this onto half of my face. So my experience with this concealer has been that when I first apply it, I like that it has this thick serum-y consistency, but I really struggle with this concealer to get to the level of coverage that I want while avoiding pilling. So pretty much every time I've used this concealer, it's made my eye cream and sunscreen just pill up horribly. So that's been a major challenge. And that includes when I have basically nothing else on my face other than my skincare. Actually, today is the one day where I'm not seeing pilling, which is always annoying when that doesn't happen while you're talking about it on camera. But the previous times I used it, it definitely created pilling. The other thing I haven't been a huge fan of with this product is it does always settle into my creases, which you can kind of see a bit on this side already. And I find that every time I try to blend it out, that ends up just shearing it out a lot. And so by the time I get it to the point where it's not just constantly pooling in my creases, there's just not enough coverage left. And for me, that kind of defeats the point of it being quite high coverage to begin with, because it's just not going to maintain that coverage. So here you can see it on this side of my face and no concealer on this side. The shade I'm using, CC, is also quite brightening on my complexion. I did pick a brighter shade on purpose because I don't have that many light concealers in my collection. I typically go for more so something that matches my skin tone. So I don't mind that this is very brightening. That was kind of the point. But I will say, if you have a similar complexion to me, I would also recommend thinking about a slightly deeper shade, because the fact that this is so bright tends to highlight the flaws in this formula a little bit more, because any sort of issues with its texture are just immediately obvious. Another thing I don't like about this concealer is I like to be able to just put my concealer on my eyes like I am right now as a base for my eyeshadow. I know primer is generally the way to go, but especially on sort of more lazy everyday makeup day looks, I want to just be able to do sort of a one and done and put concealer on, not really have to worry about primer. But when it comes to this concealer, that's definitely not a good idea. I find that because it's so serum-y, it does tend to just make your eye makeup slip and slide a lot. And so I wouldn't recommend this on the eyelids, even though for today I'm doing that just to show you guys. But that for me is another knock against this concealer. I would say the only good thing I can say about this concealer is that it is really affordable. It's basically, I think, the most affordable concealer currently in my collection. That said, I love the Pat McGrath concealer, which is going on sale all the time. Pat McGrath regularly has 30 or even sometimes 40% off on her site, and when it's on sale, that concealer is very comparably priced to this one, and I like that one way, way, way better than this one. So on the whole, I would not recommend this concealer, unfortunately. Next up, we have this powder from Westman Atelier. This is their Creme setting powder for medium skin tones. And I have to say, I was quite disappointed with this product because I had very high hopes. It's a $75 powder, so very expensive. And I thought, given how much more expensive it was than most of my other powders, that it should at least perform as well as them, if not better. But in my experience, that has definitely not been the case. It's tended to make my face just look really dry and patchy. I think from a distance it looks all right, but close up it makes especially my concealers look really, really crusty. So here it is on this side of my face, and you can see it's definitely mattified this side in comparison to this side. That said, when I look close up, I can already see it sort of emphasizing my lines and textures, like around my smile lines, around my eyes. So it's not very flattering. It has a tendency to make some products sort of clump up a little bit. Also, I just wanted to call out that my powder brush ended up picking up a lot of that foundation as well in the process, which again is something I don't like about this foundation. It just feels really wet, and so I feel like A, I have to powder it, and B, whenever I do powder it, I end up picking up a lot of the coverage just because it never really fully sets down. But let's go into the other side just to even out my face. The other thing I'm not a huge fan of is I do kind of feel like this pan is going to get slightly hard panned soon. I don't know if you guys can see in camera, but in person I can definitely see that even just having used this maybe 3 or 4 times, it's already starting to get a little bit of that hard pan appearance on some of the edges. So for these reasons, I am planning on returning this. I don't know if you guys will be able to see that, but it's looking a little bit crusty here. And honestly, I don't have super high standards for powder, but I do expect it to not look powdery or cakey. And ideally, you know, it's nice if there's a bit of blurring, but in my experience, this has no blurring and does just tend to cake up my products. So I went off camera to do my brows, so now let's talk about eyeshadow. So I actually have 2 eyeshadow palettes to talk about for today's video. One is the Lisa Eldridge Myth palette. And so this really breaks my heart to say because I was so excited about this, and I really, really love Lisa Eldridge's makeup brand, but sadly this palette really didn't work for me. So for one, a lot of the shades are kind of hard panned, even though I've only worn this twice. There's just this sort of cream to powder formula she has in here that reminds me a lot of the OG Natasha Denona cream to powder that had a tendency to go hard pan, and I feel like that's starting to happen for a lot of these. In addition, this palette is a little bit lackluster in terms of shine. You basically have these 2 shimmer shades, one of which is really gorgeous. So the deeper one I feel like definitely packed some punch. But then the topper shade is one that really doesn't give much impact. Like you really, really have to dig into it to get any payoff, and it's honestly hard to get it off your finger and onto your lids or arm. So yeah, it's not really a palette that's worked out very well for me, unfortunately. When I first tried this, I considered returning this and buying Sorcery instead because I think that overall seemed to be a better fit for me color story wise. But regardless, I'm just really disappointed with the quality and usability of this palette because I figured that would be something really consistent from Lisa Eldridge. The other palette is from Suku, another brand that I really love, and I really wanted to enjoy this palette. Similar to the Lisa Eldridge, it has a slight hard pan issue in that this glitter topper kind of similarly takes a lot of effort to get any pickup. It doesn't really provide that much shine. And the other shades are okay, but also just don't really pack much of a punch. Especially this blue shade over here, I find is really hard to pack up enough to actually appear blue on the lids. And so in general, this color story has a tendency to just look really muddy. Some of you actually commented in my videos featuring this that I looked like my eyes were bruised, which is obviously not what I'm going for, but I think having that sort of really sheer purple or really sheer blue on your eyes does have a tendency to give you that bruise quality. So for today's look, given the purpley dress that I have on, I'm going to really focus on the purpley shades in these 2 palettes. So I'm going to start out with the Myth palette, and let's see, I guess I'll first go into this shade just to kind of set up the look. I'm using my Rephr 33 brush, and I'm just going to use this to provide a gentle haze just as the backdrop of the look, and also kind of set that concealer a little bit. If you guys do have the Sorcery palette though, please let me know what you think about the quality, because that's definitely still been in my head because it's so beautiful and has a lot more shimmers than this palette, so I'm hoping it would be more up my alley. But I have not been a fan of these mattes or the glitter topper, so that's where I'm at right now. So here we are with the first shade. That actually applied pretty nicely this time. Next, with my 15 Mini from Rephr, I'm going into this more vibrant magenta shade, and I'm going to build this up first in the outer portion of my eyes, and then gradually sweep it throughout my crease as well. And in case you're curious about how this formulation performs, because it has that creamy quality, typically what happens is this. So when you first apply, it can be quite pigmented, and then you sort of need to zhuzh it out and shear it out. Ideally with a slightly stiffer brush like this 15 Mini, because otherwise it can start appearing a little patchy, which I think is happening on both of these sides. Alternatively, if you try to just use a very gentle hand, you can probably avoid some of the patchiness, but I do find this just to be a little bit more finicky of a formula than some of my other favorite luxury brands. Now to deepen, I'm going into this purple shade, and this one I'm going to focus just in the outer portion of my eyes. One thing I'm not a huge fan of with the cream formula, you might be able to see it on this side, is that if you do have texture on your lids, sometimes it can cling a little bit to it just because of the slight wetness of the cream formula. So then you do have to spend some time just blending it out. It's subtle and not that big of a problem, but definitely something I prefer not to deal with. Like if you compare these two sides, I feel like this side looks a lot more crepey than this side over here. Next, for the center of the lid, I'm going into the Suku palette, into this shade, which I feel like kind of matches what we have right now. And I'm just going to sweep this all over the lid to start. And yeah, it's like a perfect match shade-wise. But you can also see, even though I'm applying this with a finger, there's really not much shine to this shade. It's really almost like a satin matte. Very subtle metallic sheen, but isn't going to give you much impact at all. To try to amp things up a bit, I'm going into this shade from Myth using my Rephr number 2 Mini, and I'm going to kind of put this in the outer portion since it is a darker shade. I just want to have a little bit more sparkle and dimension, because right now it kind of just looks like I put one shade across my eyes and there's really not much going on. But as you can see, even though this shade is much more sparkly than the rest of the shades, it still is pretty lackluster. I mean, if you want a really subtle but still kind of colorful look, so something that has color but not texture, then maybe this will be up your alley. But for me, I just don't like the lack of versatility in this palette. And yeah, I am really struggling with the texture here on my lid today. Could also be because of the Westman Atelier powder, though this side seems to be fine, so I'm not really sure what's going on, but definitely the combination of a bunch of my disliked products is creating a very bad situation here on this eyelid. So now, just to further try to amp things up, I'm going into this glitter topper, and I'm going to put this all over the side of my eye as well. Again, you can't see that big of a difference comparing my two eyes, even though I'm really trying to pack on this glitter topper, just because it is unfortunately so subtle. And I feel like whenever I'm applying this, I always end up taking off some of the eyeshadow underneath it. So it does kind of feel like a bit of a fruitless endeavor. But at least this Suku topper is a bit better than the Lisa Eldridge one, even though it's not great. To just show you the Lisa Eldridge one action though, I'm going to go in with my Rephr number 12 brush into this topper, and I'm going to just concentrate this on the inner corners because I think that's the one place where I can maybe get it to show up a little bit. If you guys can see just that hint of pink there. I'm really packing this on. But Yeah, that's probably the best we're gonna get there. So you can see some of the pink, but it definitely doesn't work super well as a topper all over. Now, I still feel like everything is looking a little bit one-dimensional, so I'm going to go in with my Rephr 14 Mini into this deepest shade from the Myth palette, and I'm going to try to use this to just darken up the outer portion of my eye. This shade is very important for this palette to add more dimension, but as you can see also, it's not really actually that deep. I'm really digging in my brush and going over it with multiple layers, and this is kind of like the level of pigmentation you can get. So I understand having sort of buildable mattes since they might be easier for beginners, but I feel like if it's too soft, it's actually harder for beginners because then they have to go over and over and over again with the same shade just to get some visible level of depth. So now I'm just going to zhuzh out the edges with that Rephr number 15 again. Overall, I think this look is okay, but you know, it was a lot more effort than I think it was worth, and I feel like considering just how many shades I have on my lids, you're really not getting the impact and dimension that I would expect from such expensive eyeshadows. I could have definitely done a prettier look than this with probably just 3 eyeshadows from a different brand. So I went off camera to do my eyeliner, but in the process I noticed I actually got a ton of fallout as well from these shadows. I don't know if you guys will be able to see, but there's a lot of fallout, especially on this side. So that's also something oh yeah, actually now you can see the fallout because I probably should have dusted that off instead of wiping it with my finger, but let's just try to erase that as best I can. So on the whole, I really don't like either of these palettes, unfortunately. There's still part of me that wants to try other Lisa Eldridge or Suku palettes just because I do hear such amazing reviews, but it's honestly tough for me to justify because these were expensive. I bought them full price with my own money, and yeah, after a lot of struggle, this is kind of like the best look I can possibly get from them, and I feel like I had to really work hard for this look, and it's not really one that I'm particularly interested in recreating. And as a side note, apologies that the lighting's changing so much. I'm filming this right at sunset, so yeah, it's only gonna go downhill from here, but hopefully we can get through the last few products. So the next product I have here is this duo from Patrick Ta. This is She's So LA. It's the one duo I have from him with the cream and powder blush formulas. So some of you might be surprised to see this because this is one of the most hyped Patrick Ta products. I feel like I'm the only person who doesn't really like this. So to me, it's not like a complete fail of a product. It's overall okay, but I really like his single blushes that just have the powder formula. It's slightly different from this powder formula. It's more pigmented, but that is a really great formula. It's his Monochrome Moment Velvet Blush formula. So for today's look, I'm going to use this both as bronzer and as blush because for better or worse, I don't actually have a bronzer that I dislike. So, I mean, I guess that's good. I don't think I have one that I find to be overhyped. This shade, She's So LA, is versatile enough. I think I can get away with it as bronzer as well. It's definitely a bit redder than I would typically go in with, but I think it's okay just for today's look. Okay, so here we have it as bronzer. Like I said, I love the powder formula. It's really nice. But where I always get kind of stumped is with this blush. So for today's look, I'm going to apply it both ways so you can see both options. So first, I'm going to do it with powder first and then blush on top. That's the way he recommends. So with my BK Beauty 109 brush, I'm going to go now into the cream and just dot that on top. Ooh, okay, so for one, the cream is a lot more pigmented than the powder, so that always kind of surprises me a bit. I think because you have the two products, it makes it a little bit harder to calibrate compared to if you're just using one. And yeah, this is a little bit heavy-handed, but oof, oh my gosh, that's really heavy. But let me try to actually go in with my foundation brush from earlier and just like tap that out a bit. Okay, I think that looks better with some foundation on top. But on the whole, I'm just not loving how this looks. Today, I think it looks okay overall. It has that slight juicy effect that you get from the cream, but I've often used this and had it not look that great. Sometimes it's picked up the powder or picked up my complexion products underneath. And so for me, this is just kind of an additional inconvenience that doesn't actually help a lot with the look, but I sort of feel like I have to hold my breath when I apply it and hope that it isn't going to turn out badly. So with the other side, let me first just again kind of bronze my face with the powder side. My face is looking very red right now. In hindsight, these products don't necessarily go together that well, but I guess it's okay for the purposes of today's look. So here we have it just as bronzer. So now let me go in with the cream. I'm gonna go in with a lighter hand this time and just tap this in. And I think the cream by itself is pretty nice. In general, I feel like putting the two products kind of makes it a bit more complicated than it needs to be. Going in with another layer of cream just to make things match a little bit more. So there we have the cream side. And so now let me try the alternative way of putting powder on top of the cream just to show you guys. And there we have the powder on top of the cream. So you can see it has a difference in terms of finish, this side looking way juicier in comparison to this side. Though to be fair, I think part of this juiciness is also coming from the foundation, because my foundation brush has that Tom Ford foundation which never really dries down, so you know that's also contributing. So on the whole, I would say this isn't a product I hate, but just a product that I find to be pretty finicky and kind of overhyped just given how many rave reviews there are for it. I think that it can create a nice look, especially if you use the right tools, but for the most part, I just haven't found it to be that reliable, which compared to a lot of my other powder and cream blushes just makes it a product that I just don't reach for that often. So moving now to lips. These might be my most controversial hot takes, but the first one is the Dior Addict lipstick. So I actually liked this when I first got it, but the longer I've been using it, the less I've liked it. So these have been very hyped, but I find that they're really drying on my lips over time. So I like when I first apply them because they're very lightweight on the lips. You can get decent pigmentation without having a really thick layer of lipstick. They come off the lips very quickly, and then even when they're staying on the lips, they have a tendency to dry them out a bit instead of providing any nourishment. So let me first put this on for you guys. This is the shade Bandana. There, so you can see beautiful color, very juicy upon initial application. So you feel like it's gonna be really hydrating, really comfortable throughout the whole day. But for one, there's a really, really strong perfumey smell and taste to it. It kind of wafts up even like into your mouth, to your nose, you know what I mean? It's not just like this way, but also behind. So that's kind of overwhelming. And then even though it's so juicy and beautiful right now, I feel like when it dries down, it has that sort of very thin layer that just gets removed very easily, and before you know it, your lips just feel very bare and very dry again. So as much as I really, really loved this product when I first got it, unfortunately it has not stood the test of time in terms of being a lipstick that I actually reach for. The final product I want to talk about is this Clarins lip gloss. So this is, again, not a product I dislike, but I feel like it's just quite overhyped in that I tried this with the Dior lip oil as a side-by-side comparison, and since then I have continued to use both of them. And in my original video, I liked the Dior a little bit more, but they were still kind of both pretty positive. But the longer I've worn both, the Dior has just very, very clearly beaten out the Clarins. I find the Clarins similar to this Dior Lip Addict lipstick to be just way too perfumed. It has that sort of candy taste that just really lingers on your nose and palate for a long time. In addition, it's not as nourishing as the Dior lip oil or as long lasting, so I find myself never really reaching for it. The pigmentation also is much less long lasting compared to the Dior lip oil. Even though they both look really sheer when you swatch them, and actually this looks more pigmented in swatch, the Dior one has that sort of pH changing technology, so even though it's very sheer, it will still add a pink tint to your lips, whereas this one doesn't have that, and so it just relies on the pigmentation itself. And once the product starts fading, that pigmentation fades super quickly as well. So on the whole, it's a good lip gloss, but just one that I never really reached for in comparison to my other options. So that's it in terms of my full face of products that disappointed me and that I have hot takes on. Hopefully this was fun for any of you who have been curious about my updated impressions about these products. As I mentioned at the top, the point of this video is not to bash products that other people love, but just kind of to provide a reminder that there are a lot of products that are super hyped up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll work well on everyone. And so if you, like me, are feeling a lot of FOMO with all of the makeup releases and feeling like you need to pick up as many as possible, hopefully this is just a helpful reminder that that's not the case and that there's probably a lot of products in your existing collection that you might like as much, if not more, than some of these really popular hyped products. I would love to hear in the comments what you guys think about these products, or if you guys have your own hot takes about makeup products. Also, let me know what you guys think about this format of video. Do you guys want to see more hot takes? And if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!